Alright, ladies and gentlemen, today we are going to be talking about invasive species. Now, hopefully you remembered from the vocabulary video, I mentioned invasive species and I said it's a species, meaning a plant or an animal, that is not native to an area. So in other words, someone has accidentally or on purpose taken that species out of the area that it belongs to and put it into a new area. Now, when I say on purpose, I don't mean, I've done this on purpose to destroy this ecosystem. Well, no. A lot of times the person who puts a species, plant or animal, into a new area has really good reasons for doing it. They just haven't thought of the unintended consequences. So a species that is invasive is a species, plant or animal, that has been put into an area, into an ecosystem that it is not a part of. Now, if you remember, I used kudzu as the example. You guys have seen kudzu. How can you not if you live in the South? Kudzu is from Japan. Now, people brought kudzu over to the South because they wanted a way to stop soil erosion. So if you notice, kudzu tends to anchor to just about anything. So it anchors, it roots into the ground, it stops soil erosion. That's a really good reason. Remember the law of unintended consequences. The problem when you take a plant or animal out of its native area and move it to another area that it's not a part of, you have no idea if it has natural predators. You have no idea how it will affect the ecosystem that you put it in. Kudzu doesn't have any natural predators that eat it. Also, we're in the southeast where it's hot and humid, and that heat and humidity causes kudzu to grow and grow really fast. Whereas in Japan, the climate's a lot cooler. And so that slows the growth of the kudzu. Also in Japan, there are animals that naturally eat kudzu. That also stops its growth. So you took kudzu out of its native place where there was a climate that limited its growth and animals that could eat it, and you moved it to a place where there's a climate in the southern part of the United States, Mr. Miki could talk, in the southern part of the United States, where the climate causes it to grow really fast and there's nothing to eat it. That's not good. That's why you see kudzu growing over everything all the time, right? Now, over everything all the time. It seems like everything, obviously, kudzu isn't covering all the southeast, but it tends to take over the places where it is growing. Now, the cane toad. Some of you may have seen the cane toad, or I should say you've read articles about the cane toad. There are some problems in parts of Florida with the cane toad. There's huge problems in parts of Australia with the cane toad. The cane toad was brought over to Australia because they wanted an animal that could eat insects that were harming crops. All right, again, that's pretty nice. No one's going, ha 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 ha, I'm going to introduce this toad and then watch everything be destroyed. Well, no. Hey, we just need an animal that can kill these insects that are harming our crops. All right, that's fantastic. Law of unintended consequences. This thing eats some insects. It also eats just about anything else, all right? It will eat small birds, it will eat lizards, and it eats other frogs and toads. Not only that, but this cane toad, its tadpoles are larger than other frogs and toads' tadpoles, so those tadpoles are eating all the other tadpoles. So this toad is causing major problems and causing other frogs and toads to possibly become extinct. Also, this toad has poison under its skin. So any predator that tries to eat this, any lizard, any large lizard, any dog, dingo, we're in Australia, that tries to eat this thing, clamps down, gets the poison in its mouth, and dies. So there's not even a warning system where the animal clamps down the toad and maybe there's a nasty smell or something and just goes, and then it learns not to eat the toad. No, once it clamps down on the toad, it's dead. So it has no natural predators and tends to eat everything that's smaller than it. Well, this thing, needless to say, the population of the cane toad grows and continues to grow, and so that's the problem in Australia. You've got a toad, which now I think the number is in the millions, especially during the breeding season. It's in the millions, and you will see people driving and they're running over toads as they're driving on the road because there's so many toads just everywhere, and there's nothing you can do. That's an invasive species. The thought was good, let's save our crops, but whenever you introduce a plant or animal to a new ecosystem that's not a part of, that it's not native to, the law of unintended consequences takes over. So that's your lesson with kudzu and the cane toad. Now, for whatever reason, something on my face that I'm scratching, if you noticed that from the video. All right, let's go to here. Ta-da! Great Lakes Aquatic Invasive Species. Now, this is a really great site, the Nature Conservancy. They've done a really good job if you read their article, so thank you, by the way, to nature.org. They did a really excellent job at kind of breaking down what is the problem with invasive species in the Great Lakes. I have linked a video in the description box. The video is about 2.5 minutes. I want you to watch that. It's from the Fish and Wildlife Service, if I remember correctly. I will actually give credit to whom credit is due in the description box. But it's about 2.5 minute video. I want you to watch this video. It's about the Asian carp. Carp is a type of fish. It is all throughout the Mississippi River system, right, and the Illinois River. People are trying to do their best to keep the Asian carp out of the Great Lakes. Now, why would the Great Lakes have to worry about invasive species? Well, look here. See, now you can actually look here because I have the map up. So that does help, don't you think? Now, if you remember when we talked about the Great Lakes, Lake Superior, Lake Michigan, Lake Huron, Lake Erie, and Lake Ontario. And you remember the St. Lawrence River starts in Lake Ontario, flows north, empties out into the Atlantic Ocean. Now, if you remember, we said this is a group of freshwater lakes. It's the largest group of freshwater lakes in the world. But what makes the Great Lakes unique is this. They're connected. So you can take a boat and travel from Lake Superior to Lake Huron, from Lake Huron to Lake Michigan. You can also go from Lake Huron to Lake Erie, and from Lake Erie to Lake Ontario. And then, of course, from Ontario, you can go down the St. Lawrence River and out to the Atlantic Ocean. That's fantastic for trade. So you can be in the middle of Canada or the middle of the United States, depending on what side of the border you're on, and yet you can ship goods from the middle of Canada or the middle of the United States, and you can ship it out to the Atlantic Ocean and from there to any place in the world. That is the beauty of the Great Lakes. That is the strength of the Great Lakes. But there is a rule when it comes to strength, ladies and gentlemen, whether you're talking about people or you're talking about systems. The greatest strength of a person or a system is normally its greatest weakness when that strength is not refined. So the greatest strength of the Great Lakes is the fact that they're connected and by being connected, they can connect the middle of Canada and the United States to the East Coast and out to the Atlantic Ocean. What's the weakness? If anything bad gets in one of these lakes, it can spread to all the other lakes. So think about pollution. In this case, think about invasive species. So if an invasive species gets into, let's say, Lake Michigan, then all of a sudden, it can then go from Lake Michigan to Lake Superior, to Lake Huron, to Lake Erie, to Lake Ontario, down the St. Lawrence River, and out to the Atlantic Ocean. That is not good. That's a problem. So, great that you can trade, but how do you keep invasive species out? All right? Let's go back to our Great Lakes invasive species article, all right? Now, that's a fun guy right there. That would be the lamprey eel. It is not native to the United States, but this thing has hitched a ride, and you can tell from its wonderful row of nice, wonderful teeth that it sucks blood, all right? So this thing will attach itself to fish. It is a nuisance. It lives in the Great Lakes. It's not from the Great Lakes, but it got transported there. Let's go to this guy. The Asian carp, that video that I've linked in the description box is going to be about the Asian carp, right? Let me show you this. Now, dot maps are always a little suspect simply because, and yes, I'm using suspect the right way, not the slang way that everybody uses it. So, dot maps can be suspect because the dot represents a number, but you notice a dot is going to take up space on a map. So you can always make something look way worse than it actually is by just showing dots that are going to take up space on a map. So keep this in mind. It's not that Asian carp are literally covering every surface of the middle of the United States, but just know that it's infested the river systems of the Mississippi River and the Illinois River and so on and so forth. All right, so let's take a look here. It's going to be short, but it's kind of giving you how the Asian carp over time, from about to 2016, that the river systems in this area, so you're thinking the Ohio River, the Illinois River, into the Tennessee River, Mississippi River, it's gotten into all those river systems over time, and it's called the Asian carp, so you know it's not actually from the United States. But over time, from 1972 to 2016, you can see how it's grown and how many river systems it's gotten into. All right, let's take a look at a couple more. Zebra mussels. Zebra mussels, you're thinking a mussel and a zebra. This does not make sense, right? Think of mussels the way you think of a clam or an oyster, all right? Mussels are kind of the same species. Now, the zebra mussel is not from the United States. The zebra mussel is from Central Asia. And yet, actually, how should I explain this? Have you guys ever seen a cargo ship before? All right, if you haven't, look up cargo ship. They have those huge containers that weigh a ton. They're able to ship from one country to another. And a lot of times it's the easiest way when you're dealing with so much material that has to be shipped, especially weighing in the tons. All right, well, those ships have ballast. Okay, basically think of it this way. There are tanks that suck in water to help balance the ship, especially when it's going over rough waters. It'll suck in water to give the ship some balance. Well, it just so happened that a ship that was around Central Asia, I believe it was the Caspian Sea, right? Or I should say, yeah, near the Caspian Sea. It sucked in water, and these zebra mussels came along with it. All right, and so when it eventually traveled across the Atlantic Ocean to the Great Lakes, and when it released that water, out came the zebra mussels. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is zebra mussels. Let's start from 1986, and we can see that the zebra mussels like to spread, and they don't have any natural predators. So by 2016, they've covered this area. Now remember what I said, dot maps are suspect because they cover space anyway. So it's not literally like you're going to be walking through Ohio and kicking zebra mussels as you're walking, going, what's happening? It's raining mussels. All right, no. Okay, yes, I realize there's a ton of jokes just in that sentence. But the point is, it's also infested a lot of the river systems and lake systems in this area. And yet, it's invasive, all right? So it's invasive, it's not from this area. So that would be accidental, all right? So an accidental invasive species, in other words, you didn't do it on purpose like the cane toad or kudzu, you just did it by accident. A ship took in water to balance itself, released that water later on, and all of a sudden, zebra mussels everywhere. So you can tell, I think, from at least what I just showed you guys, it's a serious problem, invasive species. Now, here's 3 things about the Great Lakes. This is the normal way that people accidentally release invasive species into the Great Lakes. Number 1, what I just told you, those cargo ships, they suck in water to balance themselves in one area of the world, and then as they're going to, in this case, the Great Lakes, they release that water, and now there's a new species in the Great Lakes. So that's accidental. No one's doing that on purpose. Also, here's what's accidental. You buy a fish or you buy a plant from the pet store, but you buy a fish from the pet store. Let's say you got an aquarium, and the pet store puts in exotic flowers that look very beautiful, but those flowers are from another part of the world. Well, all of a sudden you dump that water, and that plant, all right, we're talking about that flower is connected to a plant, that plant gets dumped out with the water as you're changing the water in your aquarium, and all of a sudden that plant now gets into a new ecosystem. Same thing with animals. So the pet store sells some animal from another part of the world. You think, oh, this is fantastic, then you don't like it, and let's say you just get rid of the animal because you don't want to kill it, or the animal escapes, and now it's in a new ecosystem. So again, both of those are accidents. So pet store, ballast water, sucking in water to balance your ship, and then your cargo ship goes to another part of the world. Number 3 accidental way that invasive species get put into the Great Lakes, boats. Just recreational boating. So you've got your boat, you go out to Lake Superior, and you're doing some fishing, you're doing some jet skiing, and something attaches to your boat. And then let's say, I don't know, you go to Lake Michigan, or you go to another lake that's not connected to the Great Lakes with your boat, and you move that species with you to another lake. Or you were at some other lake, and some species attaches to your boat, you happen to go to the Great Lakes, and now all of a sudden that species is now in the Great Lakes. So that's another accidental releasing of an invasive species. Now, here's the question for you guys, and this is your assignment. So I know I have said a lot, so if you are not sure, if it's a little confusing what I've said, talk to me in conference. Your assignment is this. What would your plan be to prevent the accidental release of an invasive species into the Great Lakes? Because here's the thing, prevention is the best cure for stopping invasive species from getting into the Great Lakes. Once they get into the Great Lakes, it's really hard to try to control that invasive species, but if you can prevent it from happening, that's the key. So for you, I want you to come up with a plan. Think about the accidental things I said happen that bring invasive species to the Great Lakes. Sucking in water from one part of the world into your ship to balance it, and then releasing that water in the Great Lakes. Recreational boating. You take your boat to some area, and then something attaches to your boat, then you go to the Great Lakes, and that thing is now in the Great Lakes. Pet stores, selling exotic plants or animals, and then as you're changing water, or if it's an animal, your animal escapes, and now it's in the Great Lakes. So those are accidental releases of invasive species. Come up with a plan to stop. How do you protect? Sorry. Let me rephrase that. How would you protect the Great Lakes from the accidental release of invasive species from those 3 things I talked about? That's your assignment. How would you protect the Great Lakes from the accidental release of invasive species from those 3 things that I talked about? All right? If you have any questions, let me know. I know I said a lot. I hope I explained it well. If you have any questions, come and talk to me. By the way, I hope you guys have an awesome spring break. All right? Take care, guys.